Hi, my name's Odalis, and at my sister's $2 million wedding, while she posed for cameras and praised the real women who built her empire, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You don't belong here. Not thank you, not I'm sorry, just a dismissal at an event paid for, indirectly, by my stolen capital. But what she didn't know, I'm worth 100 times more than every guest in that room, combined, and I wasn't leaving quietly. Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever stayed silent so long that when you finally stood up, your truth burned everything down? Let me show you what happened next." The envelope had been sitting on my kitchen counter for 4 days before I dared to touch it. Thin, cheap cardstock, not even sealed properly, and my last name misspelled in a way that screamed, "This wasn't meant for someone like you." I held it between my fingers like it might dissolve. If they truly wanted me there, they wouldn't have sent it with a smirk folded into the paper. I should have tossed it, but something about the audacity of that invite, after everything, made me feel like I had to see what they were planning, just in case they were brave enough to say what they always meant out loud. Saturday came fast. Napa Valley glowed in late spring like it always did, sun-drenched, fragrant with lilac and sycamore. I pulled into the venue in my old Lexus, the only car that didn't gleam like it had been leased for the event. A valet approached with forced politeness, handing me a tag like he wasn't sure whether to park or redirect me. I wore a pale green silk dress. I'd sewn it myself weeks ago when I didn't think I'd be going anywhere. It hung clean and straight down to my ankles. No sequins, no plunging necklines, just soft fabric and clean lines, like me. I adjusted the strap on my shoulder, smoothed my hair, and walked toward the double glass doors beneath the chandeliered arch. But before I reached the welcome carpet, a man in black slacks and an earpiece stepped directly into my path. "Ma'am, deliveries and vendor access are through the service lane, around back," he said, calm but firm. I blinked. "I'm not a vendor," I said, polite but steady. "I'm a guest." He didn't move. "You'll need to check in with the coordinator first." For a second, I thought maybe it was just a mix-up. Maybe he hadn't looked closely. But I felt the heat creeping up my neck anyway, the kind of heat that comes not from weather, but from being told, subtly, efficiently, that you don't belong. Still, I nodded. Of course. He gestured toward a side entrance. So I went. Around the corner, past the line of catering staff unloading silver trays from trucks. I walked by a man yelling into his headset about boutonnieres. The scent of cooking oil hung in the air, mixed with roses and something metallic, like someone had scraped pride across pavement and left it bleeding. Inside, I paused by a hallway mirror. I looked fine, clean, neat, quiet. But I didn't shine like the women in sequins I passed earlier in the parking lot. They wore dresses named after cities. My dress had no name, just stitches I made late at night, when silence was thicker than sleep. I almost turned around. I mean it. I could have just walked back to the car, taken the scenic road out of town, and let the whole charade collapse without me. But I thought of something my father once said, something I hadn't thought of in years. Sometimes, he told me, you go to the table not for food, not for thanks, but to remind them that you earned your seat. That memory hit like a gust of wind under the ribs. So I kept walking. At the check-in table, the event coordinator didn't look up at first. She was too busy adjusting table numbers on a tablet. Her assistant, mid-20s, sleek ponytail, clipboard like a shield, finally turned to me. "Are you with the setup team?" I smiled. "No, I'm here as a guest. Odalis Varnell." She squinted at me, then at the tablet. "Spell that again?" I did. A few seconds passed. She pulled up a digital list and scrolled, then stopped. "Okay, you're on here, but it's marked with an asterisk." She turned to her colleague. "She's not on the display board." The other woman frowned, muttered something about overflow seating, and nodded toward the far end of the garden patio. "We'll find you a spot," she said. "It might be back row, but you'll still have a view of the ceremony." No apology, no explanation, just a quick smile, like a Band-Aid on an insult. I nodded again. Quiet. Always quiet. They handed me a paper wristband. Everyone else, I noticed, had digital lanyards, rose gold with engraved initials. I followed an usher down a narrow hallway. The floors were polished, but the path felt like a service corridor. No floral arrangements, no candles, just utility lights humming overhead and the faint sound of clinking glasses through a nearby wall. As I passed a small alcove near the wine bar, someone jostled a tray and a champagne glass toppled to the floor. It didn't break, but the echo bounced down the hallway like judgment. A woman's voice murmured nearby, low and sharp. "Why is she here? She wasn't supposed to actually come." They didn't see me pause. They didn't see me square my shoulders. I didn't turn around. I didn't answer. Instead, I lifted my chin and walked deeper into the venue. The hallway emptied into a side entrance of the ballroom. No grand double doors or ribbon-cut archways. Just a discreet set of panels that swung open without sound, as if trying not to disturb the real event. And that was my welcome. Inside, the air changed. Cool, perfumed, curated. Chandeliers like glass thunderclouds hung from the ceiling, catching light in a way that made you forget they were just decor. The scent of peonies and champagne floated above a room that buzzed with tailored confidence, but not one eye turned toward me. I hovered by the entrance a moment, unsure, until an assistant, young, sharp blazer, earpiece like an accessory, approached me without a smile. "Name?" she asked, already scanning her tablet. "Odellis Varnell." She tapped, then frowned. "You're not on the seating chart." My mouth twitched. "I was told I'm on the list." "You are, but—" She hesitated, then looked past me toward another staffer and tilted her head. "Just a moment." They whispered, nodded, glanced toward a corner. She returned with a practiced calm. "We'll seat you over here, if you'll follow me." No apology, just instructions. She led me across the back of the room, weaving past tables draped in ivory linen, lined with crystal cutlery and calligraphed name cards. The further we walked, the further from the center of celebration I got. Until we reached a table tucked behind a column, technically in the ballroom but clearly out of frame. It was near the hallway where servers came in and out with trays. A steady hum of motion, kitchen scents, and radio static leaked through the swinging door behind me. "This will be you," the assistant said. There were 2 chairs. One had a faint red stain. Wine, maybe. A waiter, startled, rushed over with a cloth. "Sorry about that," he said quickly, dabbing it. "Didn't realize this was a guest table." I almost smiled. "Didn't realize this was a guest table." A small card rested by the plate. Ms. O. Shippey. They didn't even bother to spell my name right. Not even close. I didn't correct it. I pulled out the cleaner chair and sat down quietly, crossed my ankles, straightened my dress, and folded my hands in my lap. They wanted me to stand out by not fitting in. They wanted me to feel like I'd shown up to a party no one wanted me at. I wasn't going to hand them that satisfaction. I watched the room instead. People shimmered under the lights. Sequins caught flashes. Heels tapped against the floor like punctuation. Laughter flowed in bursts. Wine glasses raised in synchronized grace. I recognized faces. Some I'd grown up with, others I hadn't seen since the last funeral, but none came my way. And then I heard her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Callista's voice rang through the microphone, clear and full of control. "Thank you for being here tonight. This day means the world to me, to us." A polite round of clapping. She smiled, perfectly, and reached for her fiancé's hand. "To my partner, to my new family, and to my own. Those who've always supported me, believed in me, carried me." I took a slow sip of untouched champagne, tasting the bitterness behind the bubbles. Callista glanced around with theatrical pause. "And of course," she added, voice sweet as icing, "to those who surprised us by showing up, even when we didn't think they would." A light chuckle rippled through the crowd. "Some people," she said, eyes landing in my general direction, "just don't know when they're not invited to shine." Laughter followed, this time sharper, And then, to crown it, a spotlight swept the side of the room. Not directly at me, but just enough to graze my shoulder. I didn't flinch. I sat still, lips gently pressed together, as cameras clicked and eyes flicked my way. The table next to mine, a group of younger guests in velvet and silk, leaned closer together. "Isn't that her sister?" one of them whispered, not even bothering to keep it subtle. "Why is she sitting by the bathroom?" Another girl giggled, lifting her phone. "This is gold. #family drama." My fingers tightened around the base of my glass. I didn't look at them. I didn't look anywhere but straight ahead. Somewhere in the back of my memory, my father's voice stirred again, but this time, it didn't come with comfort. It sounded far away, like something I wasn't sure still applied. A shadow fell across the table. It was one of Callista's bridesmaids. I remembered her vaguely. Gwen, I think, back from high school. She held a glass of rosé, all warm smiles and pity. "Callista didn't expect you to come," she said lightly. "Honestly, neither did we." She walked off before I could answer. I let the words settle, not like daggers, but like cold drops on the back of the neck, quiet and deliberate. Then I reached for my linen napkin, folded it once, then again. It rested in my lap, shaped like a leaf, because I may not have had a place on their chart, but I had one in that room. I adjusted the napkin in my lap one last time, then stood. My hands were steady. My breath was calm. But deep inside, something else had taken root, an old resolve I hadn't felt in years. I reached under my chair, retrieved the small package I'd carried in discreetly when I arrived, and held it against me. It wasn't flashy. No glittery wrapping, no cascading ribbons, just recycled craft paper and a piece of twine I'd knotted myself. A handmade card, inked by hand, to Callista and Everett, from Odalus. No one asked me to bring a gift. That much had been clear, but I brought it anyway. One of the servers walked by balancing champagne flutes on a tray. I gently flagged her down. "Excuse me," I said softly. "Could you help me place this on the gift table?" She glanced at it, hesitated. "Let me check with the coordinator real quick." I nodded. She returned moments later, shifting awkwardly on her heels. This one's not on the registry. Are you sure it's for the bride?" I smiled, calm as ever. "Yes, I'm sure." She led me to the gift table, a long marble slab at the front of the ballroom, stacked with shiny, oversized boxes and velvet-wrapped envelopes. Mine stood out the moment it touched the surface, understated, real, and suddenly, very noticeable. I turned back to my seat. That's when I heard them. Two young women in matching champagne-colored dresses had pulled out their phones. One whispered, "Wait, did you see that? Is that newspaper?" The other leaned in for a close-up shot. "This is unreal. Somebody brought trash to a $2 million wedding. I mean, stay humble, I guess." Click, flash, laugh. By the time I settled back into my chair, the photo had already begun its digital sprint. Stories popping up with captions like, "Somebody thought a compostable envelope was luxury. Yikes." Another read, "When you're not rich, but still want to look self-righteous at a wedding." I didn't look. I didn't even reach for my phone. But then I felt the room shift. Callista was walking toward the gift table, camera in tow. A small group of guests trailed behind her, like flower girls of status and spectacle. She looked radiant in her designer gown, eyes lit, not by warmth, but by opportunity. She picked up the package like it was something she'd just discovered on the bottom of her shoe. "Oh, wow," she said into the phone one of her friends held up, broadcasting live. "Would you look at that? My sister brought me a lesson in humility." She turned slightly toward the lens, smiling wide. "Literally?" Laughter echoed from the group behind her. She didn't open the package. Instead, she handed it to one of the venue staff and said with practiced sweetness, "Let's make sure we sort this one appropriately." They nodded. No one asked questions. The gift disappeared behind a curtain, and I sat there, still. A few guests began murmuring louder now. One older man in suspenders said just loud enough for others to hear, "Looks like a donation from Goodwill." A younger woman beside him added, "I thought she moved out of state. Didn't she, disappear?" A low buzz built around me, speculation, disdain, amusement. They weren't whispering anymore, they weren't hiding it, and I wasn't shrinking. I stood up again, slowly. My heels echoed on the polished floor. I walked past the buffet table, past the same server who had guided me earlier, past the florals and the chairs and the stairs, right up to the edge of the curtain where my gift had been taken. "Excuse me," I said. "The package I brought, I'll take it back." The staff member blinked. "Ma'am, I think it wasn't a donation," I said gently. "It was personal." He nodded slowly, stepped back behind the curtain and returned with the gift, still wrapped, untouched. I thanked him, then turned. No one stopped me. As I walked, I caught movement on a few phones, people filming. One of them zoomed in on my back. I could feel the burn of their captions without reading them. When your sister invites you just to humiliate you, and it works. I passed the center aisle, where two influencers in satin gowns whispered and giggled over their screens. I overheard one of them say, "This is getting views fast. People love a sad girl moment." I held the package against my chest. Let them laugh. It wouldn't last. I reached the edge of the ballroom. Light grew dimmer near the wall, away from the chandeliers. My reflection in the mirror near the bar was still whole, still upright. That's when someone stepped into my path. A man in a slate blue suit, maybe in his late 50s. I didn't recognize him at first. He didn't smile. He just held out his phone, screen lit up with an open app. "This is going viral," he said quietly. "I'm sorry, it's everywhere." I nodded once. Then I turned toward the far side of the ballroom, away from the spotlight, away from the stairs, and walked. Every step I took toward the edge was a step away from needing anyone's permission to belong. The hallway I walked toward felt longer than it was, wide, quiet, lined with gold-painted orchids set in marble vases. I kept my eyes forward, my grip tight around the gift now stripped of its wrapping. I didn't look back. I reached the exit doors, those grand glass panels that opened to the sweeping vineyard lawn outside. The twilight had deepened, casting soft amber through the glass, reflecting the blurred edges of everything that had just happened. I stood still for a moment, watching the breeze ripple through the trees. My fingers clenched around the folded quilt in my arms. A waiter approached gently from the side. "Would you like me to call a car for you, ma'am?" I almost said yes. But then, "Odellis? Odellis Shipley?" I turned. There, standing in heels much too sensible for this party, was Colleen Wexler. She wasn't just any guest. Colleen Wexler had built and sold 3 biotech companies by the time she was 50. She'd been on the cover of Forbes, listed in Business Insider's Top Women in Finance, and I hadn't seen her in nearly a decade. The recognition in her eyes wasn't filtered through makeup or false memories. It was clean, clear. "What are you doing here?" she asked, lowering her voice. "I just saw where you were sitting, next to the—" I gave her a small smile. "Restroom, utility hallway, close to the silverware trays." Colleen blinked hard. "That's insane. After what you did for Everett's company in 2018, after you personally pulled me out of that Axion merger meltdown, does Callista even know?" "She knows," I said calmly. "She just doesn't care." Her jaw tightened. "I came because I was invited," I added, "and because I was curious how far they'd go to make sure I stayed invisible." Colleen stepped closer, her hand brushing my elbow. "Do you want me to say something?" "I will. This is beyond insulting." But I shook my head. "Let it play out," I said. "It's almost done." I reached into my clutch, pulled out one of my cards, simple white stock, raised black letters. She took it with the same hands that had signed off on 7-figure deals. "We'll talk when there's no confetti in the air," I said softly, folding the quilt gently across my arms. I was about to step away when a voice, sharp and syrupy, cut through the air behind us. "There she is," Callista announced. Of course. She approached with the same theatrical grace she'd used at every school play, every recital. Her tone was sweet, almost maternal. "I'm worried about her," She told no one in particular. She's been off, unstable, and she brought this strange little package. She clasped her hands dramatically. Can someone check what's inside before she leaves with it? A wave of gasps rippled around us. Security, primed for spectacle, was at my side in seconds. One of them, a younger man, maybe in his 20s, looked genuinely apologetic. "Ma'am, it's just a precaution. Mind if we—" I didn't resist. I said nothing as they peeled back the last layer of twine, unfolding the soft corners of the quilt. There was no note of warning, no sharp edges, no wires or vials, just fabric. A handmade quilt stitched over time. One square held a drawing Callista had made in 4th grade of our family dog Bartleby. Another square showed my mother's handwriting, copied from an old birthday card. There was a tiny patch embroidered with the phrase Shipley Sisters, a label we'd used during our childhood garage sale stand. There were dates stitched in thread: 1996, 2001, 2010, a life, a history. One woman near the mimosa bar muttered, "Oh God, it's a scrapbook blanket." A man nearby laughed, angling his phone for a better shot. "Pinterest meets breakdown." Callista tilted her head, voice dripping with sympathy. "I guess she just needed some closure." I didn't move. I didn't cry. But the air felt thinner around me, as if someone had quietly peeled off my skin and left me standing raw. They didn't need to shout. They didn't need to push. They just needed to laugh. And they did. I reached forward, took the quilt gently from the guard's arms, and folded it once, carefully, like something sacred. My heart thudded against my ribs, not from shame, but from something older, deeper. Then, across the room, I saw Colleen. So she hadn't left. She stood still, arms crossed, eyes locked on me, not in pity, but in understanding, recognition. I walked away, down the orchid-lined hallway, past the echoes of laughter, past the open doors, the empty wrapping paper crinkled softly in my hand. I moved away from the glass doors, the quilt still folded tight in my arms. The hallway ahead had darkened as dusk settled outside. The noise from the reception swelled behind me. Cheers, clinking glasses, the kind of polished laughter people save for cameras. I kept walking until I saw a seat by the far patio door, half in shadow, half kissed by the last sliver of light. I lowered myself into it and just breathed. My phone buzzed, but I didn't check it yet. I needed a moment. One more breath. Then I looked up and saw the stage lights warming up. Earlier that week, Callista had called me, voice sugary, breezy, like old times. She'd said, "Hey, just a heads up. Everett's family is big on speeches. I thought maybe you could say a few words. You know, as my sister." I remember pausing, my instinct already nudging me away. But she'd added, "Just a short one. 5 minutes max. You don't have to be funny. Just kind." And somehow, even after everything, I'd said yes. That was the only reason I hadn't torn the invitation in half. So as the MC cleared his throat on stage and held up a gleaming program, I leaned in slightly, my fingers grazing the hem of my dress. The list was short, tight, polished. Father of the groom, maid of honor, college roommate, no sister. I kept reading, again, slower, still no mention of me. The MC never stumbled, never hesitated. He moved from one name to the next, reading with the kind of rhythm only practiced exclusion allows. Straight past me. I didn't blink. The video montage began next, projected huge across a flowing white curtain. Childhood photos, their family vacations, summers in California, 4th of July barbecues, dance recitals. I was in some of them. At first it surprised me, but then I noticed every image where I appeared had been cropped, or filtered, or dimmed. In one picture from Callista's high school graduation, I was behind her, clapping. The camera had blurred the background, soft-focused her shoulder, and left me looking like a passing stranger. Another shot from her 21st birthday? I remembered handing her the champagne, but the photo on screen cut off everything above my elbow, and not once was my name said aloud. The final frame lingered for too long. A family beach day. Callista front and center. Me in the back, half turned, like I hadn't belonged there in the first place. I swallowed hard. Not out of pain, but resolve. Then came the whisper. A soft tap at my side made me glance down. A young server knelt beside me, barely 20, maybe less, with wide eyes that darted between me and the stage. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Earlier today I was told you'd be giving a speech. But just now, someone asked us to remove the mic from your table." I tilted my head, forcing a breath through my nose. "It's okay," I said. "That was never meant for me. Just like the photo frames." His eyes lingered, sympathetic. Then he nodded and walked away. I stepped outside, past the curtain wall and onto the stone path that wrapped around the ballroom. The air was cooler now. Crickets had started their evening chorus, and strings of patio lights flickered to life above my head. That's when my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Simone, one of my old assistants from the foundation. "You didn't authorize this grant, did you?" Beneath the text, a PDF attachment. I opened it. The document was dated last fiscal year. Letterhead from a generic LLC, Calaros Inc., with my name listed under Chief Officer in a line that didn't exist. The signature at the bottom mimicked my pen stroke, but looked just slightly off. It was a grant approval, one that sent $215,000 in seed funds to a new eco-social startup led by, you guessed it, Callista Shipley. I stood still, fingers tightening around the phone. The routing trail had been muddied through sub-entities and project names, but I saw the pattern immediately. It was my network, my fund, and now I knew. She hadn't just borrowed my dressmakers. She hadn't just claimed my family memories, rewritten my place in them. She'd stolen my name. I drifted toward the patio's edge, where the brick met grass, and sat again, quilt in one hand, phone in the other. Somewhere behind me, someone was giving a roast-style speech. I heard my name, not lovingly. "She's always been a little different," the voice said, with an exaggerated drawl. "Y'all remember the time she made Callista's bridal shower about climate impact?" Laughter broke like glass on marble. I looked down at my hands, at my palms, still marked faintly with sewing thread from the quilt. Just then, a small girl ran past me, chasing a cousin. A napkin fluttered out of her hand and landed at my feet, folded, into the shape of a leaf. I picked it up, I held it, and I didn't cry. I took a breath, and I texted Simone back, "I need all the paperwork from FY 2021 and the LLC file for Calaros Inc." Her reply came within seconds. "Are you sure you want to do this tonight?" I looked up, back at the glowing ballroom where Callista posed under chandeliers. I typed, "I should have done it a year ago." I walked away from the edge of the patio and into the twilight that blanketed the vineyard courtyard. The laughter still spilled through the walls behind me, but I no longer felt like it came from a world I needed to chase. I had shifted, something inside me had turned, and I wasn't walking away anymore. I was circling in. Just past a row of manicured hedges, I found a bench beneath an old lantern. I sat, letting the cool wood steady me. That's when I heard footsteps, not hurried, not drunk, not stomping in anger, just hesitant. I looked up. He was tall, neatly put together, tuxedo pressed, tie straight, a man taught to play by the rules of rich families and expectation. "You're Odellis," he said, almost like he wasn't sure if he was interrupting a prayer. "Her younger sister?" I nodded. He didn't blink, but I saw it. The flicker of discomfort in his gaze. That subtle unease of realizing the story you've been told may not be complete. I stood and met him squarely. "I'm the woman who approved the capital that built your company's first lab." His face didn't change immediately, but his breath caught. I pulled a small envelope from my clutch, handed it to him like a forgotten RSVP. Inside, neatly folded, was a copy of the falsified grant authorization, her signature forged beside a fabricated title, dates, project codes, dollar amounts, cleanly laid out like a confession waiting to be signed. He didn't open it right away. He stared at the envelope like it had teeth. When he finally did, his fingers trembled. "She told me it came from her mentorship fund," he whispered. "Said it was part of a legacy project she'd been building for years." I said nothing for a moment. Then quietly, "She used my name, my capital, my silence." Everett looked down at the pages again. "So, the entire foundation was seeded with money I didn't know she moved under my authority." He leaned back, bracing himself on the edge of the fountain. "This could ruin her." "No," I corrected. "This could involve you, legally." He looked at me fast. I continued, calm. "If you proceed with this marriage, especially with business mergers coming from shared assets, you're stepping into a fraudulent arrangement." He opened his mouth, closed it. I didn't flinch. "If you walk away now," I said, "I won't go public. I'll deal with her quietly, personally." He looked like someone who'd just been asked to dismantle his life in front of a room full of donors. "I'm not here to threaten," I added. "I'm just done cleaning up after her." He didn't answer, but I could see the war start behind his eyes, the one between loyalty, fear, and whatever ambition she'd promised him. I left him there. Let him figure out which part of himself he could still trust. Back inside, the ballroom was humming. I stepped through the entrance deliberately this time, not skirting along the walls or ducking past floral centerpieces. I walked right through the center. Phones lifted. I saw them. A few guests nudged each other. "She's back," someone whispered. I thought she left. I didn't pause. Near the front of the room, mounted beneath a wall of framed donors and key contributors, was a large mahogany display. It listed names, etched in gold, spotlighted from beneath. Her fiancé's family, their joint investors, one from my old lab, but not mine, not anywhere. I waited until the PR coordinator, Tessa, who'd once interned under me, finished answering a question about lighting. Then I handed her a slim manila folder. "This is for the board update," I said calmly. "Correct the donor display by morning." She blinked. I thought your name wasn't formally associated with—" "It is now," I said, and walked away. A few minutes later, I entered the smaller lounge adjacent to the east veranda. It had been converted into a VIP investor suite for quiet champagne and business chatter. Colleen Wexler stood near the window, dressed in navy satin, talking with two men I knew from industry boards. She saw me and smiled, not softly but with recognition. I stepped into the circle and placed the black binder gently on the coffee table between us. And inside, tabbed in blue, was a page I'd prepared hours earlier, Violet Grove Holdings, 11% silent equity. A clause, signed years ago, stated that voting power could be transferred to an alternate officer in the event of administrative breach or misconduct. I pointed to the line. "The condition's been met." Colleen raised an eyebrow. "You're activating it?" I nodded once. "Effective immediately." The two men said nothing. They didn't need to. Power doesn't shout. It whispers through documentation. I leaned back into the chair, fingers resting gently atop the leather binding. Moments later, the door opened. Callista entered. Her heels clacked like punctuation across the hardwood. Her dress shimmered too perfectly beneath the chandelier. She was still smiling, until she saw Colleen, and then her eyes dropped, to the binder in my lap, to the men who'd turned from investors into witnesses. Her jaw stiffened. Her eyes tried to flicker back to charm, but they wouldn't hold. I looked straight at her. "Did you really think I'd stay silent forever?" Callista's grin wavered. She locked eyes with me for a moment too long, just enough to betray that she finally understood. This wasn't about drama. This wasn't a meltdown or some petty sibling rivalry. This was strategy. Quiet, clean, final. And I hadn't even begun. She turned with mechanical grace, stepping back into the ballroom like a politician walking into a press conference. Her chin lifted a fraction higher than usual as she took the stage again. I followed her, not in step, but in purpose. The air around us shifted like the charge before a storm. Her voice came through the microphone, smooth as ever. "Thank you all again for joining us tonight," she began, clutching Everett's arm like a borrowed trophy. "None of this would be possible without the incredible generosity of our donors, and of course, the man who made all this possible, my future husband." Polite applause followed, the curated kind that comes from people used to clapping on cue. Then her smile hardened. "And before we continue," she said with that delicate tilt of faux concern, "I do want to address something unfortunate. Earlier this evening we had a bit of a disturbance, someone attending under a misunderstanding, spreading some confusion." I didn't move. She gestured vaguely toward the back of the room, eyes never quite finding mine. "We've spoken to our team, and rest assured, everything is under control. And we do believe in compassion, for family, for healing. Mental health matters, even when trauma plays out in unpredictable ways." The screens around the ballroom, 3 giant panels usually used for slideshows and toasts, flickered on. There I was, frozen mid-movement, holding the quilt. The caption beneath said nothing explicit, just a single line, "A moment of disruption handled with grace." Gasps and whispers rolled like soft thunder. I knew the code. Anyone watching would. She was painting me as unstable, fragile, the difficult one. The lie had been printed on linen napkins and plated next to filet mignon. But I wasn't done. Colleen Wexler stepped forward first. No mic, no announcement. She just walked up to the stage, her heels slow and deliberate, a hush falling in her wake. When she reached the podium, she placed both hands on the sides like she owned it. Because in many ways, she did. "We can't speak of legacy or partnership tonight," she began, her voice quiet but unwavering, "without speaking of truth. And truth tonight has a name." She stepped back and motioned to me. I didn't hurry. I walked slowly through the crowd, binder tucked under one arm, no apology in my steps. I wasn't trying to disrupt the wedding. I was simply done being erased. The mic was still hot when I reached it. I didn't adjust it. I didn't thank the hosts. I didn't smile. I looked at them. Some of you know me as Audalis Shipley. Some of you may not know me at all, by design. I flipped open the binder. I'm here not because I want to ruin anything, but because my name, my funding, and my silence have all been used, without my consent, to build what you see around you. Murmurs. A few cameras rose again. "This venue," I continued, "this foundation, the partnership between Callista Rowe and Everett Kincaid, was made possible in part by Capital Y Authorized. Only I didn't know I was authorizing it." I turned to the screen technician and gave a subtle nod. Slides appeared behind me. The first showed an email, my signature copied, pasted. The second, a Shell LLC, Calaros Inc., listing me as a co-signer. The third, a document transferring ownership of lab equipment from one company to another with no traceable billing. "This isn't just fraud," I said calmly. "This is identity theft, but more than that, it's erasure." I paused. I didn't come here to seek vengeance. I came here to give a quilt, to offer history stitched by hand. Instead, I watched it be treated like a joke. I closed the binder. So now, I'll offer something else. The truth. Because no one deserves to be erased from their own story, especially not by blood. The room held its breath, then it cracked. A reporter from the back called out, "Ms. Rowe, do you have a comment on the documents just presented?" Callista's eyes flicked toward Everett, but Everett was no longer standing beside her. He was walking toward the exit, slowly, not running, but he wasn't turning around either. I stepped off the stage, binder still in hand. Walked past guests who no longer whispered, now they just stared. Someone tried to take my picture. I didn't stop them. As I passed the row of orchids along the far wall, I heard her voice. "Audalis," Callista said. But I didn't turn. I just said softly, without slowing, "Don't worry, I'm not done yet." Even as I left the stage, the air shifted. Not because of applause or protest, but because something unspoken had snapped. The room, once choreographed like a luxury brand campaign, now bristled with uncertainty. This wasn't Callista's moment anymore. It had become mine. And not because I demanded it, but because she forced it. I didn't linger. Colleen and the others had already moved into the lounge off the west wing, where the light dimmed to a muted gold and thick curtains blocked out the rising murmurs outside. The legal team stood ready, files organized, laptop glowing with pre-drafted actions awaiting my nod. I sat, opened the document with my name on the activation line. I didn't hesitate. Signature, date, a single click confirming my right as a silent majority stakeholder in Voss Row Ventures. Colleen looked over at her assistant. Freeze every PR-related asset. Brand names, logo rights, all launch stage IP. The assistant nodded and moved to execute the command. Colleen turned back to me. Statement goes live in 5. Let them scramble. We didn't toast. There was no victory dance, just the shared, quiet knowledge that truth moves faster when you've already prepared for the moment they'd lie again. Back inside, I could already hear the music falter, the transition between stage segments stalling. Something wasn't syncing. A tech's voice carried, "We've lost control of the main screen." Then Callista returned to the mic. She walked with the stiff elegance of someone whose stage presence was slipping faster than her smile could hide it. As she stepped under the spotlight, a small gust from the side fan caught the hem of her train. Her movement to recover looked casual, until the clasp near her hip gave way. A seam popped. Her gown, fitted with too much tension and not enough support, tore just above the thigh. A gasp scattered through the room. She tried to laugh, but it came out cracked. Snatching the mic from its stand, she snapped, "You don't get to ruin this! This is mine!" A beat of stunned silence, and then Everett stood. He hadn't spoken all night, had barely moved, really, since walking away from her side. Now he stepped up beside her, his voice calm but firm. "I won't be marrying Callista Rowe tonight," he said. "Or ever." Mouths opened, hands flew up with phones. Somewhere near the side, I heard someone mutter, "This is better than reality TV." Everett looked across the crowd, straight into the audience of donors and board members. "I was misled," he added, "financially, professionally, and personally." He stepped off the dais without another word. Behind him, one of the sponsor logos faded off the digital wall, then another, and another. Within seconds, the screen was nearly blank. I made my way to the PR corner. No one blocked me this time. From my clutch, I removed a flash drive, plugged it into the USB port behind the donor kiosk. The system read it instantly. A new video began to play on every screen in the ballroom. It wasn't flashy. No glam shots, no champagne flutes or hashtags, just clean transitions and real work. Footage of startup teams in modest labs, community schools being painted, a ribbon-cutting ceremony at a women's shelter where I never once stood in front of the camera. Then my voice. I never needed applause. The audio began, my tone soft, almost a whisper. I just needed the freedom to build, without noise. A pause. Then the screens dimmed. Silence. Until someone from the kitchen, barely more than a kid, walked over and placed something on the edge of the now forgotten gift table. A linen napkin, folded into a leaf. I blinked. It couldn't be. He smiled shyly. "You probably don't remember me. You did that fold once when you came to the community center with your dad. I tried to copy it for weeks." I looked at the napkin, then at him. Just nodded. No words needed. Behind me, voices roared again. Journalists running toward Callista, guests filing out with dresses hiked up and bow ties tugged loose. But I stayed for just a beat longer. Long enough to hear the first headline echo from someone's phone. Sister sabotages billionaire's wedding. Investor implosion goes viral. I turned, the chaos painted behind me like the closing act of a play I never auditioned for, and then I walked forward, heels clicking on the stone path that curved through the vineyard, not toward a car, just forward. I didn't sleep that night, not out of regret, just the weight of truth settling where silence used to be. By the time the sky softened to its pale morning hue, I was already dressed, barefoot in my kitchen, coffee half warm in hand, scrolling. My name was everywhere. Callista Rose wedding implodes amid investor fraud. Odalys Shipley, the billionaire's sister, erased from the story. Corporate drama or family feud? What we know so far. Some headlines read like cheap clickbait, others were oddly reverent. Then came the comment sections. Some mocked. She had to pull a stunt to get noticed. Others apologized on behalf of strangers. Can't believe what they did to her. Respect. But none of it surprised me. They weren't telling me anything I hadn't already lived. I didn't need a headline to validate the years I'd been erased. One whispered remark, one forgotten photo credit, one family dinner at a time. What lingered wasn't anger. It was the quiet realization that I had finally stepped outside the lie, and I wasn't going back. I set the phone aside. No message from my mother, no email, no text saying, "We were wrong," not even a flinch from Callista's account, just her curated silence, same as always. And maybe that's what stung most. How easy it was for them to say nothing, but maybe it hurt less than the forced apologies I used to beg for. Maybe silence, when expected, becomes mercy. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, no one stood there. Just a package, no return address. Inside, carefully folded, was the quilt, not torn, not stained, still pristine. Tucked atop was a yellow sticky note, slanted handwriting. "They didn't want it. Thought you might." I sat with it at my dining table, unfolded a corner stitched with faded reds and pale greens. There it was, March 3rd, 1997. The date our father brought me to my first science fair, the only one who stayed past sunset. They never knew what this was, not Callista, not Mom, not any of them. To them it was fabric and thread. To me it was a map of where I came from. A call buzzed in. Colleen. "Morning," she said, her voice both firm and amused. "You made waves." I smiled. "Tsunamis get more done." She chuckled. "You handled it with silk gloves and an iron grip. People don't forget that." "I didn't do it to be remembered," I said, looking again at the quilt's center panel. "I did it because I was tired of apologizing for taking up space. We talked logistics after that, some realignments, legal cleanups, investor expectations, but my mind wandered elsewhere. Later that day, I stopped by a small cafe I hadn't visited in years. Quiet, warm, no suits, no cameras, just the hum of clinking cups and stories passed between friends. I took my coffee to a corner booth and sat by the window. Across from me, a family gathered, teenagers bickering over syrup, a dad trying to referee, a grandmother tossing side eyes with every interruption. It was chaos, it was loud, and it was beautiful. Not because I wanted it, not anymore, but because I once believed I had to earn it. I used to think family was something you could fix if you just did enough, stayed quiet enough, gave long enough. But some people don't want healing. They want hierarchy. They want you small. I watched them laugh, not with envy, just observation. I wouldn't have that kind of family, but I would have something better. Myself, unapologetic, unedited. I stood to leave, gathering my bag. The barista passed to clear my table. "Wait," she said, reaching gently toward the cup. "Someone left something." There, beside the saucer, was a folded napkin, creased perfectly into a small leaf. I picked it up slowly, smiling without knowing why. Pressed it once in my palm, walked out without another word, let the door shut behind me. Because now I understood. They hadn't humiliated me. They'd revealed themselves. And I'd finally stepped into the light. They tried to humiliate me in front of the world, but the truth is, they had already lost me long before the invitations went out. Dignity isn't something you need to announce, and silence, when worn with grace, becomes armor. So here's my question to you. Have you ever been pushed into a corner and found your power there? Tell me below. I read every word.